Welcome to Mythic Musings, where each video will tell you about a myth from the ancient past in order to help inspire your writing. I've taken so much inspiration from these stories and adding to an already very colourful database of classical reception of these So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the story, I just wanted to share a little bit about the history of poetry and why we get such different variations of the same stories when it comes to Greek mythology. So this picture here is of the oldest surviving epic poem, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's from the 3rd millennium BCE in ancient Mesopotamia. And actually, from having studied this epic, it's clear that many stories reflect tales that we would recognise from our more modern day Bible, including a story about a great flood. And we get to see this in Greek mythology as well. It just kind of repeats itself throughout history. Poetry has been a way of preserving history, sharing ideas and lessons. And although many poems were carved into tablets that only kind of remain as fragments, many other poems were passed on generation to generation through what we know as oral tradition, from Hesiod to Homer and beyond. So if you've ever wondered why there are so many different variations of stories, it's often because in putting together these fragments, translators have to kind of fill in these missing pieces of information that's kind of varied from person to person. And obviously a translator will probably put their own spin on depending on changes in the language as well. My best analogy is that putting the stories together is like trying to put a jigsaw together with people who have only heard what the picture is through a game of Chinese whispers. So you can kind of see why there's a lot of changes and variations throughout history. But the fact that poetry has been used for millennia surely shows how important it is for communities. It's how we know of the heroic tales of Heracles and countless other heroes, demigods, and those punished by the gods, which is what we're going to see here with Arachne. So Ovid was a Roman poet whose best-known work, the Metamorphoses, tells the stories of myths and legends in chronological order from the creation of the universe to the death of Caesar. His work was heavily influenced by the works of other writers in his time, plus those that came before him, so including Homer. And Homer's where we get the stories about the Trojan War and Odysseus' trip back from Troy with his crew. Now, Ovid had the makings of becoming an orator. Definitely a career that his father would have preferred him to go into, but he actually neglected his studies to pursue poetry instead, as the best of us do. So Athena, who is another kind of big part of the story of Arachne, is the patron of Athens. She's also the goddess of war, handicraft, and practical reason. You may also see her called Minerva, which is her kind of Roman identification. She was born fully grown without a mother from the forehead of Zeus, though there is another story that Zeus swallowed Metis, the goddess of counsel, while she was pregnant with Athena, and then she emerged from Zeus. I think the general story is that there was some sort of prophecy, as there usually is, that Athena was going to be the most powerful goddess, and obviously Zeus, wanting to kind of make sure that history didn't repeat itself, tried to get rid of her. Athena is portrayed wearing an aegis, which is her shield with the face of the Gorgon Medusa depicted on it, which you can't see in this picture, but it would be on her shield. She's always got her body armour and a lance, as you can see in the picture, and is associated with birds, primarily an owl, which became famous as a symbol of Athens. And, we get little glimpses of that when we watch films like Clash of the Titans, the little Bibbo, the little kind of mini little owl, which is the owl associated with Athena. She's often depicted as a goddess who helps heroes and is of great value to them in their quests, though there are a few instances in which mortal women have felt her wrath, such as Arachne and Medusa. Though there's always different stories that kind of maybe show a different side to her, so it all depends on which story you want to follow. As mentioned previously, when it comes to many myths, there are a few different versions to choose from. There is an alternative to this tale taken from Ovid's Metamorphoses that states that because Arachne lost to Athena, Arachne hangs herself and Athena transforms her as an act of mercy, saving her life rather than as a punishment. This is also the story that Stephen Fry chooses to use in his Mythos story, where he's very fond of Athena, and sees her as a saviour to Arachne, who, although her work was amazing and was actually far superior to Athena's, because of the blasphemous nature of the contents of the piece that she'd created, she was never going to win the competition. It depends on what side of the story you want to go with, who you believe. Obviously, Ovid paints a very different picture, showing that it was a punishment of Arachne, and that it was more of an unjustified rage from Athena rather than a fair punishment. And when reading Ovid's version of the tale, we see that Arachne is more of a victim standing up to an oppressive system and paying the price for doing so. And it is actually believed that Ovid related to Arachne, and there were some kind of parallels between them, which is why he chose to depict her in this way, as he was exiled from Rome himself in part of some of his more outspoken works, such as the Ars Amatoria, Art of Love. So in a way, his talent was censored as it didn't kind of fit in with the Roman ideal. So there's definitely some parallels that can be drawn between the two. And that's the great thing about classical reception, is that we can take the stories and we can change them up to suit the ideals of the time. So this is the shortened version of the story of Arachne. So Arachne is a Lydian maiden, daughter of Idmon of Colophon, who was a famous dyer in Phoenician purple. Those who watched her weave said it was like watching the goddess Athena herself, who obviously is the goddess of crafts as well as lots of other things. But Arachne denied it, saying that the talent was all of her own and nothing to do with the divine. Classic play of hubris here, I believe. Now, Athena, upon hearing Arachne's rejection of her, disguised herself as an old woman, or old hag, as it's sometimes shown as, and scorned her for her insolence. Arachne continued to deny the goddess. When the goddess revealed herself, she challenged Arachne to a weaving competition. Athena's tapestry depicted the strength of the gods and the ways in which they had inflicted punishment to those who had gone up against them. Arachne's tapestry, however, depicted the gods' abuse of their power, with pictures that represented the defilement of mortal girls, such as Europa, Leda, and Danae, amongst others. Athena could not deny Arachne's skill, and nor would she ignore the blatant disrespect of the contents of the tapestry itself, especially as Athena is the only virgin goddess. And this is where the punishment comes in. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, it says, "Even as she spoke, before withdrawing from her victim's sight, she sprinkled her with juice, extract of herbs of Hecate. At once all hair fell off, her nose and ears remained not, and her head shrunk rapidly in size, as well as all her body, leaving her diminutive. Her slender fingers gathered to her sides as long, thin legs, and all her other parts were fast absorbed in her abdomen, whence she vented a fine thread. And ever since, Arachne, as a spider, weaves her web." So many of these myths have been depicted in artwork as well, which helps to give us an even more inspiration to draw from. This painting is called Las Hilandras, also known as The Spinners, by Diego Velázquez, which depicts the story of Arachne's competition with Athena. We can see Athena in the background depicted with her helmet and armour, and the scene displayed on the tapestry is the rape of Europa. I studied this story in particular as part of my dissertation and was fascinated by the reach these stories had throughout the years, inspiring books, music, films and games. Here are just a few paintings and illustrations of some of the stories depicted in Arachne's tapestry, including the rape of Leda by Zeus or Jupiter, as we can see with the swan, and the rape of Europa, with the god having disguised himself as an animal again in order to have his way with the mortal women. Pictured is the depiction of the story of Arachne in Dante's Divine Comedy. and Athena attacking Arachne in a painting by Peter Paul Rubens. And lastly, in this picture, Athena has just revealed herself to the Lydian women who fall at her feet in worship, with Arachne carrying on doing what she was doing and not stopping to worship like the others. So when I was doing this as a workshop, I would always ask my participants some discussion questions, because I just think that that helps to get our ideas flowing, and it gives us a bit of an understanding of what we may have already known about these myths or stories. So that's the kind of first question that I usually ask is, have they heard that story before? Have you heard that story before? It may be that you've heard it in snippets, maybe in the form of different books that you've read, maybe programs you've watched or films that you've watched, or maybe you've just heard parts of it in passing as part of kind of like pop culture type of thing. What were your thoughts on the myth? You know, we don't always have to like everything we come across. That's forming our inspiration. Sometimes actually the best poems can come from something that we don't like, because we can have a lot of passion about kind of, you know, things that we do like and things that we don't like. It's the kind of the usual, the middle meh ground that doesn't really give us that inspiration. And in particular with this story, whose side were you on? Are you going to be following the roots of Ovid and kind of feeling a little bit sad for Arachne and what happened to her? Or are you going to follow the kind of Stephen Fry route in which, you know, Athena rules and she just, you know, was trying to save Arachne in the end? And finally, here are some prompts for you. These are here to help you aid your writing. They are in by no means something that you have to use in order to write a piece about Arachne. But if you want some starting points, you know, this is the place to come. So we have got hindsight is a wonderful thing, which for me kind of maybe written from the viewpoint of Arachne. You know, would she have acted differently if she'd have known that it was Athena in disguise? So it could be kind of a, I don't know, an insight into her thought process at the time, maybe. We have Web of Woe. We have the Spinners, which could be maybe what the other ladies that were involved, the Lydian women, what they thought what was going on, especially with the depiction that we had of Las Helandras, to use as a bit of inspiration. And Divine Retribution, maybe a poem that could be from the viewpoint of Athena, and kind of, you know, seeing what's kind of transpiring around her and, you know, the shock that she feels of being rejected by Arachne. So yeah, hope to hear your writing and hope you get inspired. So if you have been inspired and written anything based on this video and would like to share it, you can do so by joining our community, the Bounty Bunch, on Facebook, or you can send us an email to natalie@athenasbounty.co.uk. I absolutely love reading all the submissions that I get, and sometimes there's even a chance to get it shared on my podcast, the Bounty Bunch podcast, as well. So get writing and get sharing. Thank you.